This is the story of a child left for dead in the vast, uncaring wilderness, a mountain man who saw a soul where others saw a burden, and a mother whose love crossed the plains carrying a gift of impossible hope. It is the story of two worlds colliding, one of cold, hard pragmatism that discards what is not useful, and another of quiet wisdom that knows the value of a single, small life. It begins with an act of cruelty meant to be an ending, but which became, instead, a beginning. For how does a heart, told it is worthless, learn to beat again? And what is the true measure of a person's worth, the gold they can carry, or the light they can bring into the world? The creek whispered a cold, hungry song. To 8-year-old Nita, it sounded like it wanted to swallow her and her little sister, Talai, whole. The man, Finch, had a face like a dried-up riverbed, all cracks and hard lines. He shoved a single, rock-hard biscuit into Nita's hand. "This is all," he said, his voice flat and final, the sound of a door locking for good. "Don't follow. The water's good. You're on your own." He didn't look at them as he turned his mule and walked away, disappearing into the grey dusk. He was their guide, the man who had promised to take them and their father to a new settlement. But their father had taken a fever 2 days ago, and his spirit had left his body by the morning light. To Finch, the girls were now just baggage, two small mouths that consumed without producing. Nita clutched the biscuit, a square of abandonment in her palm. Talai, only 5, whimpered and pressed her face into Nita's deerskin dress. Her small body trembled like a trapped bird. Nita's own heart felt like a cold stone in her chest. She looked down at Talai, at her tear-streaked face and button eyes that looked just like how she felt inside, small, lost, and terrified. She broke the biscuit in half, a useless gesture of care against a world that had just shown them none. The piece she gave Talai was slightly bigger. It was the only power she had left. They huddled together as the shadows grew long and the prairie wolves began their lonely chorus, two small figures erased from the world. He came with the dawn, moving not like a man but like a part of the landscape itself. He was tall and broad, dressed in buckskin that was the color of the earth, and his beard was a wild tangle of brown and gray. He carried a long rifle as if it were an extension of his arm. Nita saw him first, a silhouette against the rising sun, and her breath caught in her throat. She pulled Talai behind her, a small, fierce protector with nothing but her own fragile body as a shield. The man stopped a respectful distance away. He did not speak. He simply knelt, placing his rifle on the ground beside him. He pulled a water skin from his belt and set it on a flat rock, then a piece of dried meat next to it. He looked at them, and his eyes were not like Finch's. Finch's eyes were like chips of slate, hard and empty. This man's eyes were the color of the deep woods, and they held a quiet, steady light. "Water," he said, his voice a low rumble, like distant thunder but without the threat. "Food." He made no move to come closer. He just waited. Time stretched on, measured by the frantic pounding of Nita's heart. Talai's whimpers had subsided into silent, watchful terror. Finally, the gnawing emptiness in Nita's stomach won out over her fear. She took a hesitant step forward, then another, her eyes locked on the man. He remained perfectly still, a statue of patience. She snatched the water skin and the jerky and scurried back to Talai, her heart hammering against her ribs. They drank the cool, clean water in desperate gulps and tore at the tough, smoky meat with their teeth. It was the best thing Nita had ever tasted. When she dared to look up again, the man was still there, watching. He offered a small, sad smile that did not quite reach his eyes. "My name is Silas," he said softly. "You're safe now." The safe felt foreign, a word from a language she had forgotten how to speak. But for the first time in days, a tiny, flickering warmth ignited in the cold stone of her heart. The next morning, as Silas was gently cleaning a cut on Talai's knee, a figure appeared on the horizon. It was a woman, walking with a determined, tireless gait that spoke of a long and desperate journey. As she drew closer, Nita's breath hitched. "Mama," she whispered, the word a fragile prayer. The woman broke into a run, her face a mask of anguish and relief. It was their mother, Yona. She fell to her knees and gathered her 2 daughters into her arms, burying her face in their hair, her body racked with silent, shuddering sobs. Nita and Talai clung to her, their own tears finally flowing freely, washing away the terror of the past few days. After a long moment, Yona looked up at Silas, her dark eyes full of a gratitude so profound it needed no words. From a woven basket she carried, she carefully lifted a hen. It was a beautiful bird, its feathers the color of a summer sunset, shimmering with hints of copper and gold. It was not made of metal, but it was a treasure all the same, one of the special breed her family had raised for generations, a living piece of their home. A gift, Yona said, her voice thick with emotion. For my daughters. For their lives. Silas looked at the hen, then at the reunited family. He shook his head gently. There is no payment for doing what is right, he said. But Yona insisted, placing the hen on the ground. Where we are from, she said, her gaze steady and proud, a life for a life is a debt of honor. This hen brings eggs. It brings life. Please. It is all I have to give. Silas saw the fierce dignity in her eyes and finally nodded, accepting the gift not as payment, but as the seal of a bond forged in desperation, and answered with compassion. The golden hen clucked softly, a strange and wonderful sound in the vast silence of the prairie, a promise of a new morning. Silas led them away from the open plains, into the folds of the mountains where he made his home. It was a hidden valley, a sanctuary of green grass, tall pines, and a clear, cold stream that tumbled over smooth stones. A small, sturdy cabin stood nestled against a rock face, smoke curling from its chimney like a friendly greeting. For Nita, it was like stepping into a dream. The world of Finch, of dust and abandonment and cold, hard edges, vanished, replaced by the scent of pine and damp earth, the sound of birdsong, and the feeling of thick, soft grass beneath her feet. Yona immediately set about creating a home, her hands never idle. She mended the girls' torn clothes with thread Silas gave her, she cooked savory stews over the fire, and in the evenings, she would hum old songs while the golden hen roosted near the warmth of the hearth. She was the comfort, the warmth, the soft place to land. Silas was the quiet teacher. He didn't speak much, but when he did, his words were like seeds planted in the fertile ground of Nita's quiet, observant mind. One afternoon, he found her staring at her reflection in the stream. Her face was thin, her eyes still holding a shadow of the fear she had known. He sat beside her, not speaking for a long time. Then he picked up a fallen leaf. "Does this leaf worry about its worth?" he asked gently. Nita shook her head. "Does the stream ask permission to flow? Does the mountain apologize for its size?" Nita looked from the leaf to the water to the towering peaks around them. "No," she whispered. Silas nodded, his gaze kind. "Everything has its own nature, its own spirit. It doesn't need to be earned. It just is. Your spirit is strong, little one." Finch could not see it because his own is withered and small. He placed a hand on her shoulder, and his touch was firm and reassuring. It felt like the strength of the mountain itself. In that hidden valley, surrounded by the quiet wisdom of Silas and the fierce love of her mother, Nita began to heal. The cold stone in her chest was slowly, day by day, starting to feel like a heart again. Nita's hands, once perpetually clenched in fear, began to open. She learned the names of the plants that could heal and the ones that could harm. She learned to read the stories the animal tracks told in the mud. One evening, Silas sat by the fire, carving a small piece of pine wood. Nita watched, fascinated, as his knife peeled away slivers of wood to reveal a shape within. He worked in silence, the only sounds the crackle of the fire and the soft scraping of his blade. When he was finished, he held it out to her. It was a bird, a small hawk with its wings outstretched, ready for flight. Its wooden form was simple but perfect. "For you," he said. "A hawk is not the strongest bird, nor the fastest. But it sees. It sees everything. It has a clear eye and a true heart." Nita took the carving, her fingers tracing the smooth lines of its wings. It felt warm in her hand. For the first time since her father's passing, a real smile touched her lips, a smile that reached her eyes and made them shine. She looked from the wooden bird to Silas, and then to her mother, who was watching them with a gentle expression. the golden hen clucked softly by the fire. In that moment, the valley was not just a sanctuary, it was home. The ache of what she had lost was still there, a faint scar on her heart, but it was now surrounded by a new and powerful feeling, the feeling of being found. She finally understood that she was not a burden to be discarded. She was Nita. She was a daughter. She was a survivor. And like the hawk in her hand, she was learning how to see. We are at a turning point in Nita's story. She has found safety, and a new sense of self is beginning to bloom in the soil of this found family. But the world she escaped has not forgotten her, and a shadow is about to fall on this peaceful valley. Before we see what happens next, if you are finding inspiration in Nita's journey from despair to hope, please take a moment to support our channel. Like this video, subscribe so you don't miss the conclusion of her story, and leave a comment below telling us what has touched you the most so far. Your support allows us to continue telling stories like this, stories of resilience, compassion, and the enduring strength of the human spirit. Thank you. Now, let us return to the valley. The peace was shattered by the sound of a horse's whinny, sharp and out of place in the valley's quiet symphony. Nita's blood ran cold. She knew that sound. Standing at the mouth of the valley, silhouetted against the harsh afternoon sun, was Finch. He was not alone. Behind him were two other rough-looking men. His eyes, those empty chips of slate, scanned the clearing and fixed upon them. A cruel, triumphant smirk twisted his lips. He had not come back for the girls. He had followed the stream, convinced it must lead to gold. Finding them was an unexpected, and in his mind, useful, complication. Well, look what the old coyote dragged in, Finch called out, his voice dripping with greasy contempt. My two little runaway servants. And their mother. He dismounted, his movements arrogant and proprietary. I'll be taking them back now. Got work for them. Silas stepped forward, placing himself between Finch and the family. He was unarmed, having left his rifle in the cabin, but his presence was a wall. They are not your servants, Silas said, his voice dangerously calm. They are freed. Finch laughed, a harsh, ugly sound that startled the birds from the trees. Free? I paid their father a good price for their passage and 5 years of their labor. I have a paper. They belong to me. Now step aside, old man, before you get hurt. Yona rushed to her daughters, pulling them behind her, her body a shield of pure maternal fury. You are a liar and a monster, she spat. You left them to die. Finch just shrugged. Proving that would be your word against mine. And out here, he gestured to the vast, empty landscape beyond the valley, my word, and my guns, are worth a whole lot more than yours. His men fanned out, their hands resting on the pistols at their hips. The sanctuary had become a cage. Just as Finch's men began to advance, another sound broke the tension, the steady, rhythmic beat of shod horses. A column of blue-coated soldiers rode into the valley, led by a man with captain's bars on his shoulders. He was clean-shaven, with a square jaw and eyes that took in the scene with sharp, intelligent authority. This was Captain Hayes of the U.S. Army. Finch's face immediately transformed, his aggressive sneer replaced by a mask of beleaguered righteousness. Thank God, Captain, he exclaimed, rushing toward the officer. You've arrived just in time. This man, he pointed a trembling, accusatory finger at Silas, this squatter has taken my property. These two girls and their mother. They're my indentured servants, runaways. Captain Hayes dismounted, his gaze sweeping from Finch's theatrical display to Silas's stoic silence, and finally to Yona and the two terrified girls clinging to her. He was a man of the law, a law that was often complex and imperfectly applied in these remote territories. His face was unreadable, a mask of professional duty. Is this true? He asked, his voice directed at Silas. Silas met his gaze without flinching. He abandoned these children by a creek 2 weeks ago. He left them with a single biscuit to die. Finch sputtered, a lie. I left them in the care of a passing missionary. This man must have stolen them. The captain's eyes narrowed. It was a chaotic scene of accusation and denial. He looked at Yona. What do you have to say? Yona, her voice trembling but firm, repeated Silas's story, her words a torrent of a mother's pain and outrage. But she knew, as they all did, that in the eyes of men like Hayes, she was just an Apache woman, and Finch was a white man with a plausible story. The captain's face remained impassive. The fate of their new life, their very freedom, rested in the hands of this stranger. Captain Hayes listened to all the testimony, his expression unchanging. The world seemed to hold its breath. Nita felt Talai trembling behind her and she squeezed her little sister's hand. She remembered Finch's cold eyes, the finality in his voice. She remembered the gnawing hunger and the terror of the wolves. Then she remembered Silas's gentle patience, the warmth of the carved hawk in her palm, and the sound of her mother's humming by the fire. A fire lit inside her, chasing away the last vestiges of fear. The captain was about to speak, to render his judgment based on the conflicting words of the adults, when Nita took a small step forward. "Sir," she said. Her voice was small, but it cut through the tense silence. Every eye turned to her. Captain Hayes looked down, surprised. "Yes, child." Nita held out her clenched fist. "He is lying." She spoke the words with a simple, profound certainty. She uncurled her fingers. In her palm lay a small, grey, stone-hard piece of biscuit, stained with dirt and grime. It was her half, the one she had been unable to eat, the one she had kept wrapped in a leaf as a bitter reminder. "This is what he gave us," she said, her voice gaining strength. "He said, this is all he said, don't follow. She told us the water was good to drink before we died." She looked directly at Finch, and for the first time, he could not meet her gaze. He looked away, his face suddenly pale. "He didn't leave us with a missionary," Nita continued, her voice clear and ringing in the quiet valley. "He left us with this." For the wolves she did not cry. Her eyes were as clear and steady as the hawk Silas had carved for her. She was not asking for pity. She was bearing witness. A profound silence descended upon the valley. Nita's small, dirt-stained piece of hardtack lay in her palm like a judge's gavel. It was more powerful than Finch's lies, more eloquent than Yona's tears, more damning than any legal document. It was the truth, made plain and undeniable. Captain Hayes stared at the piece of biscuit, then looked at Nita's face, no longer that of a terrified victim, but of a solemn witness. He saw the unwavering honesty in her eyes. He then turned his gaze to Finch, who was now sweating, his blustering facade completely crumbled, revealing the craven cruelty beneath. The captain's expression, once impassive, now hardened into one of cold contempt. He had seen much of the worst of humanity on the frontier, but the casual, pragmatic cruelty of abandoning children to die struck a deep and dissonant chord. He had made his judgment. "Mr. Finch," Captain Hayes said, his voice like chipping ice, "fraud and perjury are serious crimes. But abandoning children to the elements, that is an offense against God and man." He turned to his sergeant. "Arrest him." And his men. Finch stared in disbelief, then sputtered and protested as the soldiers seized him. His indignant cries faded as he was led away, a man undone not by a powerful adversary, but by the quiet, unshakable truth of a child he had deemed worthless. Captain Hayes then walked over to Nita. He knelt down, so his eyes were level with hers. "You are very brave," he said, his voice now gentle. He looked at Silas and Yona. "They are free. They are your family. No one will trouble you here." With a nod, he mounted his horse and led his men away, leaving behind a silence that was no longer tense, but filled with a deep, resounding peace. The sun began to set, painting the valley in hues of orange and purple. The golden hen pecked contentedly at the ground near the cabin. The crisis had passed. Finch was gone. Their home was safe. Silas placed a comforting hand on Yona's shoulder, and she gave him a weary but grateful smile. Talai, her fear finally gone, ran to chase a butterfly near the stream. Nita stood alone for a moment, watching her. She walked to the edge of the water, the same stream where Silas had first spoken to her of her own intrinsic worth. She opened her hand and looked at the carved hawk he had given her. It represented his wisdom, his protection, the new way he had taught her to see the world, and herself. Then she looked at the other hand, at the piece of hardtack. It represented Finch's cruelty, her abandonment, the voice that had told her she was nothing. It was the anchor to her pain. For a long moment, she held them both, one in each hand, the love and the hurt, the rescue and the wound. Then, with a deep breath, she threw the hardtack into the fast-flowing water. She watched the current catch it, tumble it over the rocks, and carry it away until it was gone from sight. Next, she held the wooden hawk. She cherished it, a symbol of her transformation. But she knew the hawk's true purpose was to fly. With a final, gentle touch of her thumb over its wings, she placed it in the stream as well. It bobbed on the surface, caught the current, and began its own journey downstream, a message of hope sent out into the world. She didn't need the symbols anymore. She had the truth inside her. She was not what was done to her. She was who she chose to be. She turned back towards the cabin, where her mother, her sister, and the wise man who had saved her were waiting. Her heart was no longer a stone, it was as full and as bright as the evening star just beginning to appear in the vast, peaceful sky. She was home.